Hey guys, Peter here to do an album review. Today I'm here to tell you about the latest from die Apokalyptischen Reiter, the Divine Horsemen, on July 2nd on Nuclear Blast. This album has 15 tracks, 1 hour and 20 minutes in length, and this is the band's 11th full-length studio record. Now before we get into the meat and bones of this record, I really feel like I have to give you a little bit of an information in terms of what the starting point or what drove the creation of this album, because that definitely is going to have an impact on how you perceive this record. This album celebrates the 25th anniversary of the band. It was recorded across 2 days in the fall of 2020 without any rehearsals or any preparation. Just showing up into the studio, press record, and go. Whatever comes out of it, comes out of it. And what came out of it is exactly what you're going to get on this album. And that allows the record to be very diverse, very eclectic, very chaotic across all the different elements. Vocals, lyrics, sound, structure, song construction. There's just not a linear approach or a linear feel in terms of how this album comes across, of how this album is put together, that gives you a sense of continuity from song to song. So what you have here is an album with absolutely zero structure to it, because it doesn't matter how you change the tracking listing, it doesn't matter how you reorganize these songs, the same feel of chaos is present regardless. Because the soundscape is just so different, the song constructions are just so different, that it's nearly impossible to give a sort of a roadmap to an album that was constructed in this kind of format. Now, the soundscape of the record offers a lot of diversity. It pulls influences from tribal sounds, almost like Sepultura roots style approach as far as the drums are concerned. Then you get jazz elements, you get psychedelic, you get black metal. I feel like if you dive deep enough into this record, you're going to find elements of almost any single genre throughout this whole record. There's just so much there to digest. There's so many layers on the songs. There's just so many things happening from track to track that this is an album that really gives you something different almost every time you go through it. It allows you to discover something else that it's been hidden there that you just didn't catch the first time going through a song or going through the album in general. So it's a very diverse, very eclectic record, an album that pulls you in a lot of different directions with every single song, not necessarily giving you a sense of balance or a sense of where you are, where you're going, and how you're going to get there. It's really not a record like that. It's a record that it's built with absolutely zero boundaries, built with absolutely zero constraints in terms of what you can do from a creative process. This is a record about the moment. It's a record that's very organic. It's a record that really comes out in that spur, in that specific moment in time where that energy, where that vibe, where that feel came through and they just captured it into the studio. That's exactly what this record is, and because of that, it feels very diverse, it feels very different, and it has a very unique nature within itself. Within the sound, there are two elements that, while being very diverse, I really feel like I have to mention in them, because they had a very strong impact on how you perceive the soundscape and the changes in that soundscape from track to track. One of them is the drums, the other is the guitars. The drums on this album are phenomenal. Perhaps one of the highlights of the record is how the drums sound and how they were executed, because those two things are very different. You're going to get a different style from song to song. You're going to get different approaches. You're going to get different feels, sometimes more tribal, sometimes a little bit more black metal driven, sometimes a little bit heavier, sometimes setting more of the tone, sometimes grounding the album. So the drums are doing different things depending on where you are within the record, depending on where you are within the songs. But in terms of how they come across, the quality, the balance, the warmth that they have, that is something that you're going to get regardless of what drove them to get to where they are. And that to me was an important element throughout this record. Same thing could be said for the guitars. The guitars sometimes are a little bit chunkier, sometimes a little bit more driven, sometimes a little bit more abrupt, sometimes a little bit bigger in volume, sometimes a little bit more melodic. They always have different abilities to give you a different face, and by giving you a different face, a different perspective, they really change where the songs are taking you. But as far as the output, as far as the quality of execution is concerned, very balanced throughout. There's not a song where you can see that the guitars were subpar or they didn't deliver exactly what the song called for. So you have a different output as far as what you're going to get out of them, but the quality of the execution that drove that output stays very balanced from the beginning all the way to the end. Once you get into the vocals, I think you can expect volatility, you can expect eclecticness, you can expect diversity. This is an album that it's at the spur of the moment. So if you're going to have a structure that's chaotic, if you're going to have a sound that's eclectic, I don't think you would expect the vocals to be any different. This is a very multicultural sounding record, and you see that in the vocal styles, you see that with the different languages that they approach within the album, and you see that in the overall soundscape. It's an album that really takes from a lot of different ethnicities, takes from a lot of different cultures, from a lot of different roots, from a lot of different genres, and they try to mix it and match it as best as possible in order to create some sort of life, some sort of method of transportation within the songs, but then also from song to song. So the vocals are very diverse. They really matched the overall diversity of the record, and to me was something that really matched well with what you're listening to. If you had one style, one approach, and the songs are going in 1,000 different directions, the tracks would feel completely lost within themselves. So you have to create the perfect vocal approach in order to match where the song is going. Not necessarily keeping in mind the record, because this is not about the album as a whole. This is really a record that's about the individuality of the songs and how can we make them as unique, as interesting as possible. So you have to change the vocal approach from track to track in order to match what the sound is giving you, and that's exactly what's going to happen on this album. Overall, this is not a record for me. It just feels too different. I'm too lost within it. It's an album that I can enjoy, listen to it once, understand the dynamic approaches that created the record, understand what it represents to the band, understand how it was built, how it was constructed, the eclectic nature that it drove it, and really have some sort of love for that sort of approach, for that sort of idea, and having the guts and having the strength of soul to really do this as an album. It's not an easy record for you to really dive into as the band and as a listener, so I can really appreciate that aspect of it. But once you listen to it once, that shine that it has, that difference that it offers, it really becomes perhaps a little bit too much, and it's not necessarily a record that's going to have me coming back for more. It's an album that I felt that was interesting, that I enjoyed listening to it, that I enjoyed navigating to it, that I enjoyed digesting it the first time around, but then it's a record that I wanted to put away and not necessarily dive back into it, at least not in the short term period, because it's also an hour and 20 minutes in length, so it's a very long record, so it takes a lot out of the listener. So it's not an album that offers necessarily playability or allows you to come back to it immediately once it's over, but it's an album that has a lot of diversity and a lot of different things that are new and interesting, and that the first time that you sit through it, you're really going to have some enjoyment coming out of it. Now, as far as songs are concerned, I picked 3 tracks that I really gravitated to it immediately, starting off with Salus, heavy driven, blistering track. The drums are so powerful on this song, really grounding the sound, really offering a strong foundation for the overall record. The riffs are dark, they're melodic, and on top of it you have a lot of darkness coming from the vocals, also a lot of aggression. So it's a very potent song, both musically and vocally. It's short, it's sweet, it's to the point. Next you have Amaguru, another track that has that same short, sweet, to the point start feel, and they come back to back. So these 2 songs almost feel like one feels like the continuation of the other. So I really like these 2 tracks because of the balance, the continuity that they really offer within themselves, which is not something that you're going to get really out of this record. So a track that has that direct to the point feel, melodic, dark, intense, packing a lot of aggression. Once again, the drums becoming the soul of this song, creating heaviness, creating a thunderous movement. The vocals are a little bit more linear on this track. They really don't fluctuate as much, and the guitars add an incredible atmosphere to the overall sound. And like I said earlier, another song that's short, sweet, to the point, and I really enjoy that about this track, because when you get that punch, when you get that heaviness, when you get that aggression, you almost want to pack as much of it as possible in as short period of time as possible, and that's exactly what these 2 songs do. Next you have Children of Mother Night, a very somber, atmospheric song. The vocals really bring to the forefront the atmosphere that you're getting out of the sound of the track. The 2 go hand in hand. You can't talk about the sound atmosphere without talking about the vocal atmosphere, and how those 2 come together to bring such a methodic, dark approach to the overall track in terms of how it's constructed, in terms of how it's delivered. It has this doomy goth vibe from the beginning, from that slow start at the beginning, as it moves forward, musically and vocally, very methodic. The song then explodes a little bit in the last third. In the last third of the track, you feel like there's a little bit of growth. The song expands, it starts to move, it starts to become a little bit bigger, but then it implodes back again, and it goes back exactly to the same sound, the same approach that it had at the beginning. So it's a track that goes full circle. But that explosion there in the last third really changes a little bit of the song. It gives a little bit of energy. It almost wakes you up, because the track is so do me is so methodic, like I said, that really almost rocks you to sleep, if you will. So having that explosion there is really important to really reignite you, wake you back up, and re-engage you with the track itself before closing on the same note that it started. This is it. This is Die Apokalyptischen Reiter with Divine Horsemen out July 2nd on Nuclear Blast. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.